Good evening, everybody. My name is Wayne Ranney, and I serve on the board of directors for the Grand Canyon Historical Society. And we welcome you to tonight's virtual outing. The Grand Canyon Historical Society, our mission is to celebrate and promote the study and preservation of the Grand Canyon region's cultural and natural history for the education and enjoyment of its members and the public. And just last year in 2024, we celebrated 40 years of existence when the society was started by some pioneer members of Grand Canyon Village. We encourage you to become a member. Our dues are only $35 a year. We are an all-volunteer organization, and we're hopeful that many of you can join us so that we can continue to expand all of our activities like these virtual outings and in-person outings and our tri-annual history symposiums. If you do become a member, you'll get 4 issues in the calendar year of the Old Pioneer magazine, which has a lot of history articles about the Grand Canyon and the Grand Canyon region. So we do these virtual outings. We conduct tours at the South and North Rim, and you can find it on our website. Our website is very easy, grandcanyonhistory.org.
With that, I would like to introduce to you Laurie Algar as she presents a Disney life, 43 years working for Walt. So I asked Laurie if she'd give us this presentation, and she kindly agreed. She's California born, and she's a mixed media mosaic artist. She's exhibited at shows in Boulder, Fort Collins, and Denver, Colorado, and participated in juried art festivals throughout the United States. Laurie's father, Jim Algar, worked with Walt Disney for 43 years and got to do 2 river trips in Grand Canyon in 58 and 59.
My story begins at Stanford University in the strangely named Hammer and Coffin Club. This is the humor club of Stanford, where my father is getting his master's degree in journalism. He is sitting in the front row, the third from the right, next to his good friend, Ollie Johnston. While at Stanford, there were some women attending, and my father meets a lovely young woman with the unusual name of Persis. She is there on full scholarship, wearing a coat made by her mother. But don't let that demure pose fool you. She discovers modern dance and quickly indulges in the joys of creative expression. My father is intrigued by this lovely, intelligent young woman, and the courtship continues. My father draws, as a hobby, cartoons for cards, and my mother gains the nickname of Skipper because my father had a car and she loved to drive. Keep in mind, my father's getting his master's in journalism, but he loves to draw as a hobby, and he illustrates his letters home to his family, creates his own cards. When suddenly, in July 1934, my father receives this letter. Dear Mr. Algar, Mr. Gilman Gist from the Hammer and Coffin Club was in our studio today, and he suggested that we write to you. We should like to offer you a tryout of from 3 days to 1 week in our cartooning department, if you can arrange to come to Los Angeles for that short period of time. This is from Walt Disney Productions on Hyperion Avenue. My father jumps on the midnight train from San Francisco to Los Angeles and walks 5 miles to 2719 Hyperion Avenue. He writes later, I found the place and was thrilled just to stare at the sign at the top of the building. No little placard beside the doorbell for Walt. He had a sign as big as a billboard. He always was a showman, Mickey Mouse and neon lights. In December 1934, success. We take pleasure in notifying you at this time of exercise the option of your exclusive services for an additional period of 13 weeks. Little did he know that 13 weeks would become 43 years. My father later remarked that he felt guilty that he made the cut, but Gilman Gist did not. My father was one of 6 chosen at the time, and later remarked that overnight journey became a one-way ticket and I was in a new world. Oddly enough, I had never heard of animation, But we were in the middle of a depression. Times were hard, crops were failing, jobs were scarce. As you may well imagine, an invitation to visit Mickey Mouse and maybe make a drawing or two was like a touch of fairy dust. My father stays with his friends Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas, who had also attended Stanford, and he encourages them to apply to the studio as well, and the rest is history. They are considered two of the top animators in Disney's history, part of the historic 9 Old Men. They become famous ambassadors of Disney history in later years. I do have a few letters of my father from his early years at the studio, so please bear with me as I highlight some precious Disney moments among the paragraphs. Work begins on Snow White, September 1937. He's writing to my mother, "Dear Skipper, home after a night shift, a long day, but feeling pretty good about it all because my animation went well today. I am working on my last scene in the feature, a scene of rats scurrying down a rusty dungeon drain as the queen enters to prepare the poisoned apple. Good creepy atmosphere stuff." While the animators are working on Snow White for years, they did take breaks to draw caricatures of themselves or each other. My father, with his florid English complexion and prominent profile, was a natural subject. This is the early version of Donald Duck, probably 1935. One of my favorites, this is the Algar compass for Mickey heads. In 1937, my parents attended the premiere of Snow White barely. My father writes, "Yesterday, I wrote the studio a check for $11 for 2 tickets to the Snow White premiere to be held at the Carthay. Don't get your hopes up too high, though, for I really don't expect to get the tickets. Walt is not particularly encouraging the studio personnel to be there. In fact, after all the passes and courtesy tickets have been handed out, there probably won't be any room for us small fry. The studio is taking our money with no promise at all to provide the tickets. However, my parents did attend the premiere, and Snow White opens to great acclaim." My father wrote, "The audience was with the thing for every foot of film. They responded at every spot where a laugh was built toward, and even were amused by things we hadn't especially designed for laughs. After Snow White has been badly frightened by imagined terrors in her flight into the woods and falls down sobbing, a wave of relief and sympathetic chuckles greeted the bunnies who find her. My scene. I was pleasantly surprised at how people went for the animals. Their appearance on the screen evoked an immediate, genuine response. The dwarves are funnier, but their success depends on consciously built-in humor, whereas the animals have only to appear. A good sign for Bambi." Walt is presented with a special Oscar and 7 small ones by Miss Shirley Temple. Snow White opens to acclaim, and Walt sends everyone a congratulatory memo. "Dear Jim, since the critics have voted Snow White the best picture for 1938, I thought you might like to stow away the attached copy of Film Daily with all the other memoirs, etc." And Walt was famous for his red pencil signatures. This is the actual Film Daily cover. Snow White, 1938's best. Donald Duck, recently introduced, is gaining more popularity as the scrappy character prone to outrageous outbursts, and Walt wants to return to his original mouse, the sweet and gentle Mickey. My father writes, "We had a meeting with Walt Saturday instead of next Tuesday. We were able to show him a story reel, 1 frame to his scene done in Technicolor. Walt was very enthused about The Sorcerer. He even went so far as to predict that it will be the finest picture we have ever made." My father wrote, Walt turned several artists loose to make color sketches and paintings. It was going to be like an opera set. I'm not quite sure how I got handed the job of carrying it on into animation, beyond the fact that I had been an animator, and also I suppose it was thought I knew a little bit about music with my band background. My father played clarinet in the Stanford Marching Band. Dear Skipper, I took over on Sorcerer today. Percy handed me the brunt of things in my chance this morning. He wants me seasoned for Pinocchio, looming as the next feature ahead of Bambi. My father writes, I met Stokowski today. He is the conductor for the film Fantasia. We worked with him all day. His face is quite white and almost colorless, matching his shocks of white hair and leaving his blue eyes prominent. He is businesslike, intent on working fast. He was very enthusiastic about our picture. He wants to make it good because he's interested in doing others of a musical nature with us. Walt is already talking of Bolero as a possibility. Walt and Stokowski talking about the score for Fantasia. January 1937. Beloved Skipper, goodness how the work is piling up. The way it is stacking against February 13th, their planned wedding date, frightens me, but the only thing to do is to pitch in and try to get the work out. Next week, we begin working nights. Next weekend, we will be tied up shooting shadow effects of the maestro for our titles. Then tomorrow morning, Percy and I have a session at the studio. Immediately after music is canned on film, we will have the animators on our tail. Busy, you said it. However, the wedding date was met, married in the chapel at Stanford University. And Walt meets with Igor Stravinsky, the only contemporary composer in Fantasia. His Rite of Spring segment featured the ferocious dinosaurs. My father wrote, once during the long ordeal of getting Fantasia finished, that was a tough picture, a move into unknown territory. I came out of the studio theater and caught sight of Walt resting on a bench in the lobby. He had been working hard. We knew he was near exhaustion, as were the rest of us. But to find Walt stealing a cat nap in that place was so unusual as to seem shocking. I tiptoed back out and went outside the door as though I were leaving a sick room. February 1941. Wednesday night, we attended the big premiere of Fantasia. For all us Disneyites, there will never be another occasion quite to compare with the Snow White opening. My father is the director of the iconic Sorcerer's Apprentice from Fantasia. My father writes, Fantasia seemed to impress the audience tremendously. There were ovations of applause breaking in at well-liked spots throughout. One reviewer next day said it was the greatest innovation in the movie since the advent of sound. And this is the cover of the Fantasia program from the opening. Direction of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, James Algar. This is a fun little inside fact about Fantasia. I'll let you read the comments on the side. The sorcerer is named Yensid after Disney. In the program, Walt writes, perhaps Bach and Beethoven are strange bedfellows for Mickey Mouse, but it's all been a lot of fun. And I want to thank Leopold Stokowski, Deems Taylor, and all my coworkers for holding my head up when the water got too deep. And remember, it is the sorcerer's hat that gives Mickey his magical powers in the film. My father has remained close friends with Ollie Johnston, who loved trains, as did Walt, and we are riding in Ollie's backyard train. I say we, I am hidden in my mother's maternity smock. I am the little caboose in the family. Raised by my big brothers. In 1941, work begins on Bambi. Walt brings in live animals to inspire the artist for Bambi. That's Frank Thomas, my father's other friend from Stanford University. Walt recognizes the potential of filming animals in their natural element for entertainment and education, and hires his good friends Al and Alma Malott, who are already up in Alaska. Walt sends my father to Alaska, and numerous memos fly back and forth. Keep in mind, this is back before computers and the internet, no email. 1948. Walt was well satisfied with the whole thing. I might cite a remark he made with references to the puffins and wildflowers. He observed that they have little to do technically with the story of the seals, yet they are wonderfully interesting to look at, and they definitely round out an audience's impression of that island. The Malotts were an amazing team, spending years in snowfields, swamps, and deserts, relying on instinct and endless patience, and a dedication to Walt's vision of capturing the natural world. My father wrote right from the start, Walt himself made two very important and basic decisions. One, we would never send a script into the field. And two, we would leave out all reference to humans and human habitation. Stick with the animals, Walt always said. Walt, by instinct, was a storyteller, not a documentarian. He hated the word documentary. He connected it with dullness. He would never use it. Just as he wanted emotion in his cartoons, he wanted drama in his nature films. So a cameraman was sent into the field to find the story, not to invent it. Walt is thrilled with his Oscar recognition for the True Life Adventures. And in a generous show of gratitude to my father, Walt offers to send my mother to Africa for 9 weeks to accompany my father as they begin work on the African lion. You've never seen 4 small suitcases packed more quickly with calls to relatives and neighbors to take on this small pack of wolves. The 2 older brothers moved in across the street with a generous neighbor, and my younger brother and I went to live with my cousins. Now the studio would embark on the most ambitious true life adventure, filming 3 years in Africa for African Lion. Walt is inspecting the special steel-enforced truck built in Burbank and shipped to Africa, where it would serve as studio and living quarters for the Malotts. My parents in Africa. They're inside the truck. A special coffee table book was created to accompany the African lion. This is the Disney version. This is the actual photograph. Toasting the hard work of the Malotts in Walt's kitchen in his office. My father is to the left. How can you miss that profile? Alma Malott emphasized in a later interview that she and Al always considered Walt a good friend who shared their love for and curiosity about the natural world rather than a boss. The True Life Adventures are now in full swing in the 50s, and my summers are spent on road trips throughout the Wild West, catching up with my father on location shoots. To this day, I still only travel with 1 suitcase. I am collecting rocks and pebbles, a lifelong passion which culminates in my current career as a mosaic artist. The national parks. Notice the lack of people and guardrails at Yellowstone. Ah, the 50s. Dad flies in to meet us. And yes, my idiot brother has managed to worm his way outside the fence at the Grand Canyon. We visited them all. Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, Zion, Mesa Verde, my mother driving the back roads, no GPS, no freeways or highways, settling in each evening in some 50s motor court motel, preferably with a pool. Spending a summer in Wyoming's Bighorn Mountains, filming Vanishing Prairie, one of my father's favorites. There was always time for an art break. We were on these trips. My father goes full true life adventure director on us. Here, kids, wait in the car. I've got this. I think I'm wearing my Mickey Mouse t-shirt. Who needs a seatbelt or a safety bar? My mother, an adventure gal herself, keeps a grip on my belt, and that was good enough for us. I had a fun childhood. What can I say? The studio is enjoying great success with the nature films, and Walt turns his attention to the mighty Grand Canyon and sends my father to direct a short documentary, Grand Canyon Suite, set to Ferde Gruff's orchestral piece of the same name. I was a small child at the time, but on impulse, my father pulls my oldest brother, Bruce, a senior at North Hollywood High School, out of class one morning to fly to the canyon that night. My brother recalled, I was called to the principal's office. It was impulsive of father, no mention of the trip that morning, couldn't even wait for me to come home. I bought a turquoise blue hat at the hotel gift shop. We were on the river that afternoon. That's my brother Bruce with Ernst Heidegger on the river. My father. That's Ernst with his wife, Jeannie. And Georgie White, looking very tanned and always wearing a red hard hat. My brother recalls Ernst sounding very German and complaining that there were no steaks in the coolers. The raft was comprised of 3 large black rubber pontoons strapped together. One held people and supplies, one held the outboard motor, and the middle raft had 2x4 boards strapped across with a plywood board nailed to the boards. A camera was nailed to the mounted plywood, probably 3 feet high, covered in plastic except for the lens. Heading into the rapids, Georgie was struggling to keep the raft pointed toward the rapids, but one huge rapid suddenly put the front of the raft up, pitched straight up, and Ernst tumbled back into the raft with the camera. And after that, Ernst and Georgie having a long argument about the poorly constructed and mounted camera platform, and they didn't speak for days after that. There was quiet water along the shore with Ernst filming close-ups, telling my brother Bruce to push a driftwood log into the eddy. Coming out of the canyon at Phantom Ranch and riding mules up to the rim, they knew the way. They flew home the next day after spending 5 days on the river. So let's watch a little bit of Grand Canyon Suite. Poor little lizard. In 1960, the studio returns to the river, actually 1959, for 10 Who Dared, the story of John Wesley Powell, the first man to navigate and map the unexplored river. My father spent several weeks on the river in various locations in Colorado and Utah. The following slides are a brief look behind the scenes. It is always an amusing shock for me to see my father bearded, disheveled, grubby, and worn out. As an executive director and producer at the studio, he was always impeccably dressed in suit and tie. But as many of you know, life on the river is hardly a glamour shoot, and it is definitely not a leisurely glide down calm waters. These are behind the scenes shots filming at the river. Doc Marchson is a technical advisor. So tell us, Jim, what's life like on the river? That's the Emma Dean in the background. You'll notice my father with his pale skin is always completely covered with his hat on, prone to sunburn. Again, keep in mind, this is 1959. And there are no special effects with CGI technology that we have today. So the movie is a wonderful, clunky, clumsy look at the river. The river is the starring feature of the movie. And as you'll see in the following clips, the green screen shots are almost amusing, with cold water being thrown on the actors in front of the scenes. Working on the script. Filming in Arches in Utah. I believe is putting in at Lee's Ferry. The all-important chow line. The happy crew. And let's watch a little bit of 10 Who Dared. As I said, the river is the main attraction of the film.
By the year 1869, the map of the United States was nearly complete. Trappers, explorers, and government survey parties had scouted practically every corner of the continent. Yet, even as late as '69, there remained one major area that was unknown and uncharted. This was the territory through which the Colorado River made its way. 1,000 miles of trackless wasteland. Here was mystery, beckoning the adventurous, calling to the bold in spirit. The man who answered the challenge was John Wesley Powell, scientist, one-time school teacher, and former officer in the Union Army. Major Powell was determined to risk the rapids that were said to lie in wait in these deep gorges, and he found 9 other hardy souls willing to run them with him. And so our story is a tale of 10 men, 10 who dared the unknown. It's an authentic account taken from the Major's own records. Amen. I had warned the men that we'd eventually come to rapids. And at the first fast water, I was pleased to see them share my own excitement. In a couple of days, the weather cleared. Bill Dunn was his old self and able to pull an oar again. And our journey was resumed. Now we found ourselves entering a world that was both grim and beautiful. The cliffs towered above us for thousands of feet. At one point, we passed a wall of crystallized lava, striking evidence that rivers of molten rock once poured into this gorge. erected by the Congress of the United States to Major John Wesley Powell, first explorer of the Grand Canyon, who descended the river with his party in rowboats, traversing the gorge beneath this point, August 17, 1869.
It is a fun movie to watch. Like I said, clumsy acting, but the river and scenery cannot be beat. There is a replica of the Emma Dean, I believe, in Page, Arizona. And my father wrote later, quoting Eric Severide, who was writing about Ed Murrow. He kept all his life a small slab of redwood with his name initials carved upon it and a date from his youth. It seemed to be a kind of talisman, his personal holy grail, something to keep alive his golden time when life was joy. For John F. Kennedy, it was a piece of coconut shell on which he carved a message in the PT boat, Adventure of the War. All men have seen a glimpse of Camelot. For me, my father, it is a broken board propeller mounted on a curved piece of driftwood. This prop came off Major Powell's boat, the Emma Dean Disney movie version. I picked it up when it had been cast aside on a sandbar in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. A spare propeller was being put in its place. Somebody was about to chuck it into the river to sink out of sight forever. I decided to retrieve it as my souvenir for the boat trip through the Grand Canyon. I keep it on display in my office at the studio. The broken blade rather symbolizes all the rough moments of filmmaking. I count it as my Oscar for 10 Who Dared. Sadly, that's about the only accolade my father received for the film. My father later remarked that Ben Johnson, one of the actors who had been a cowboy in real life, was the only actor who could handle a rowboat without a stunt double. The scenery is the best part of the film. And again, it's fun to watch. And I have a friend who watched it, who was a river guide, and he could pinpoint every single location where they were filming. I'm sure you could do the same. The true life adventures are attracting Hollywood's attention. And my father knows that the studio is nominated for 3 awards that night, so we are allowed to stay up late to watch the Academy Awards. My father attends the Academy Awards every year because he is a member of the Directors Guild who vote for the awards. So that night we are staying up late to watch, and I dress for the special occasion. So let's go to the Academy Awards.
The nominees for live action short subjects are Grand Canyon, Walt Disney,
Journey in the Spring, Ian Ferguson,
The Kiss, John Patrick Hayes,
Snows of Orongi, New Zealand Screenboard, George Best Associates,
T is for Tumbleweed, James A. Leventhal, and the winner, Mr. Curtis?
you, Mrs. Cooper.
Thank you. Grand Canyon, Walt Disney.
On behalf of Walt and the Disney gang, thank you very much.
But there's more.
The next awards category is for documentary pictures. Perhaps we should introduce the presenters in documentary style. So they are married.
He's Robert Wagner.
She is Natalie Wood. The nominees for the feature documentary award are Antarctic Crossing, James Carr,
The Hidden World, Robert Snyder.
Psychiatric Nursing, Nathan Zucker,
White Wilderness, Ben Sharpstein. The winner is White Wilderness, Ben Sharpstein.
My father has to wrestle Natalie for that second Oscar.
Tonight I had 2 pockets for Walt. Thank you again.
The nominees for the Short Subject Documentary Award are Amma Girls, Ben Sharpstein,
Employees Only, Kenneth J. Brown.
Journey into Spring, Ian Ferguson,
The Living Stone, Tom Daly.
Overture, Thorold Dickinson. And the winner is Amma Girls, Ben Sharpstein.
And one more.
Once again, accepting from Mr. Ben Sharpstein, Mr. James Algar.
I have 2 pockets for Walt, well, actually 3 that night, though I think my father is just as enchanted with the lovely Natalie Wood. I asked my father why he didn't say more that night, and he said, "Those things are heavy. I thought I was going to drop one." My brother and I weighed the Oscar because I was going to take it to show and tell the next morning at school. I had a shoebox lined with Kleenex and the Oscar fit perfectly. I had Oscar written on the lid with a black crayon. However, my father explained that these were Walt's and they were taken to the studio the next morning. However, my desire for show and tell did come to fruition for our mantle to the Walt Disney Family Museum showcase in San Francisco. I visited the Disney archives at the studio a few years ago and was told they had an actual Oscar and would I like to see and hold it? Well, sure. In fact, I'd love to take it home because lo and behold, it was awarded for White Wilderness, the same Oscar my father picked up 60 years ago that in the video you just saw. Sadly, they did not see the irony, although Walt seemed fine with the idea. We're going to take a small side trip now that I think you will enjoy. It's March 1961, and my father has received some handwritten notes from a high school kid scribbled on notebook paper, asking if he could visit the studio and take a tour while coming to Disneyland. Now, the studio was never open for tours, and my father could have easily ignored the notes or turned them over to public relations for the standard Walt autograph card. But he recognized the kid's family from his hometown of Modesto, California, and took the time to write back. "Dear George, I have arranged for you and your friend to take a tour through the studio on Tuesday, March 28th. If you will come to the main gate a few minutes ahead of time, I shall hope to have a chance to chat with you." Unfortunately, they did not meet that day, but young George, being raised right, took the time to write a thank you note. "Dear Mr. Algar, thank you for letting us go through the studio. It was very interesting. And yes, that is young George Lucas of Star Wars fame." Years later, my brother John discovered that my father had kept these notes and sent copies to Lucasfilms, and we received this reply. "Thank you very much for sending the letters you found in your father's papers. It takes me back to a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Your father was my first introduction to the film business and therefore played an important role in my career choice. I will always remember him fondly. Again, I appreciate your kindness." So for all the Star Wars fans out there, on behalf of my father, you're very welcome. In the 1970s, my father wrote, "Star Wars, what a personal triumph for young George Lucas. I haven't been as thrilled by a movie since I don't know when. At one point, there were tears in my eyes and a lump in my throat at the sheer brilliance of the thing. It made one proud of the medium. If there is to be a new Walt Disney, this young man is it. He is 33, just about the age Walt was when he brought out Snow White. Lucas calls it a film Walt Disney might have made. A gracious remark." Coming full circle, Disney buys Lucasfilms in 2012. Walt was always fascinated with new technology and loved to contribute exhibits to the world's fairs. Perhaps one of the more stressful endeavors of my father's career creating great moments with Mr. Lincoln for the 1964 World's Fair in New York. My father would often come home after a long day's work and down 2 cocktails instead of the usual single scotch and water, and bow his head with tales of Lincoln's erratic head spinning, blinking eyes, swooping hands, stuttering speech, and crushing the chair when he sat down. I can only imagine this conversation. There was so much pressure on Walt in the studio to get Lincoln up and running for the World's Fair. But we attended the World's Fair when Lincoln was finally fully functioning. My father's films continue into the 1960s. The Incredible Journey, one of my father's favorites. At the urging of the cast and crew, we acquired a Siamese cat, whom my father loved. And she loved him back with kittens. When Walt died suddenly in 1966, my father later wrote, "I remember the last time I saw Walt. The mark of death was upon him, though I only knew that later. He had been in the hospital across the street and one lung had been removed. Suddenly he was back in his office, I think against doctor's orders, and he was calling story meetings. I was called in to see what product I could manage in my quarter. He looked terrible, white, drawn, haggard, the dark hair beginning to gray. The eyes were burning. There was no smile. He probably was hurting. Did Walt Disney know he was going to die? I don't know. That last series of meetings had a certain desperate air. I think maybe he did, but I'll never know. We were told nothing about his illness and the seriousness of it. I remember some 10 days later when the news came that Walt had died, it was mid-morning. We weren't prepared for the shock. Grown men stood around and cried. We had lost a leader and a friend." My father dutifully fulfilled his final years of his contract, working closely with Ron Miller, Walt's son-in-law, and Roy Disney Jr., but frankly, I think he was glad to close the book once Walt was gone. My father fulfilled a lifetime dream to retire to Carmel, where his mother had lived since 1939. He put in a wonderful garden on Isabella Avenue, and the Disney artist flourished. Sadly, he suffered a major stroke 2 years after moving, losing all speech and paralyzed on his right side. We visited when we could, and we're very fortunate to have a full-time caretaker. He loved walks around the scenic point, looking for sea otters and always wearing his beloved English tweed hat. The Disney artist was silenced and stilled with disability. Yet the creative spark of art remained. My father continued to paint and draw after his stroke using his left hand. We were very intrigued with these abstract and mystical works, and frankly, he seemed to improve as the years went on. After my parents passed away, my husband and I were married on my parents' anniversary, February 13th, on the rocks at the scenic point in Carmel, where my father's and mother's ashes are scattered to the wind and waves. Our family was very honored when he was inducted as a Disney legend in 1998. My brothers and I received the award from Roy Disney Jr. before his passing. I recently visited the studio, which is always fun for my brothers and I. We all worked there summers between college years, delivering art supplies and scripts, sharpening pencils, running errands. There were no computers back then, no email, no internet, so young legs moved everything along. This is the Legends Plaza with Dopey holding up the apex. I'm standing with my father's plaque beneath Roy Disney's. This is Walt's office. The portraits on the wall are by Norman Rockwell, a personal friend of Walt's. This is Shirley Temple's miniature Oscars for Snow White. Walt loved miniatures of all kinds. This is Walt's desk with ashtrays. He was a heavy smoker, but was never photographed with a cigarette, and sadly died of lung cancer. This is a model of his jet, which I flew on. I was also invited to Lucasfilms to give this talk with our connection to George Lucas. This is about as close as I came to being on the speaker's wall with Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks and Martin Scorsese and all sorts of famous people. As you may imagine, visiting Lucasfilms is a dream come true for any Star Wars fans. These are the actual props from the movie. In closing, it's a scene of Han Solo. I bid farewell to a wonderful, loving father. Who always inspired me to explore new paths, seek adventure, love animals. As Tom said, I am a professional pet sitter across the United States and Europe. Create my own art and take many photographs along the journey. I am personally grateful to Walt Disney for his joyful creativity and his abiding inspiration for my father to create Disney magic in film, television, World's Fairs, and the parks for 43 years. I think he's showing Walt the Grand Canyon, perhaps. And finally, to my father, I'm so fortunate to have lived a life shaped by your extraordinary years with Walt. Thank you, Dad, for showing me all the ways to live a true life. My father may be gone, but I have the memories, the photos, the letters. But most importantly, I will always have the magic. Yes, I kept the hat. In closing, I'm going to let someone else introduce a very brief recap of my father's 43 amazing years at Walt Disney Studios.
You know, if there's one question everyone seems to ask about our true life adventures, it's how do we manage to pry into the private lives of the animals? Get the secrets of nature on film. So let's move over to the True Life Adventure Unit and meet James Algar, writer-director of the series.
How did this man get from drawing pigs to writing a presidential speech to directing 9 Academy Award-winning films? James Algar led the development of many new projects in one of the most diverse careers at Disney.
But here, let's take a look at some film on the moviola, and I'll show you what I mean.
Jim joined Disney in 1934 when he passed a standard animation test, redrawing a Three Little Pigs scene. His first assignment was on the very first animated feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This recently discovered pencil test shows some of Jim's earliest work. Soon he was directing a major Mickey Mouse project, and Jim established himself as a top-notch animation director.
Hello, you feather.
Much later, he helped develop the landmark show Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. It featured the first life-size, fully animated figure of a human.
And Jim went into all of Lincoln's writings and so on and sort of made a pastiche of all of them that became that speech.
If destruction be our lot, it must spring from amongst us. It cannot come from abroad.
But Jim's most recognized body of work began taking form earlier during World War II. Through training films like this one, Jim demonstrated how to inform as well as entertain. So Walt had him direct a special half-hour subject that became an innovative approach to documentary filmmaking.
A story strange as fantasy, yet a story straight from the realm of fact. For this is a true life adventure.
Thus began an entire series of highly acclaimed true life adventures, most of them directed and written by James Algar.
Never before in the history of motion pictures has a series been so internationally honored or so enjoyed. Remember the drama of Seal Island, the enchantment of Beaver Valley, the strange fascination of nature's half-acre, the spectacular wonders of water birds, the excitement of the Olympic elk.
Audiences were fascinated by close-up views of things they'd never seen before. Guided by Jim's background in animation storytelling, the films blend real-life drama with personality and humor. The series won more than 30 awards and made a lasting impact in the field of nature. Jim continued to produce mostly fictional animal films until his retirement in 1977. Even these films carry with them the respect Jim had for the natural wonders of our world.
And in her vast wilderness laboratory, nature will go on creating her fascinating mysteries for as long as time shall last, and for as long as man shall leave her work untouched.
Okay,
That was lovely.
thank you.
So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. You can also type questions in the chat for Laurie, however you'd like to do that. I'll start off with a question. I was a little confused there. Skipper, your mom, and your
Yes.
dad were romancing. She was in Stanford while he was in LA, is that right?
No, they were both at Stanford. I should have made that clear. They were both at Stanford at the same time. She was getting her master's degree in English. He was getting his master's degree in journalism in the 1930s.
Well, then he went down to LA and started working for Walt.
Mhm.
And it sounds like as he was working the years 37, 35, for Walt, he was writing letters to Skipper, to your mom. Was she still in Stanford at the time before they were
She
married?
had graduated. She was teaching up in Northern California. So
Okay.
yes, they didn't get married right away. They got married about 4 years after leaving Stanford. So he's writing letters back and forth.
Okay,
Skipper.
so, and they, long distance relationship, they get a chance to visit every now and then. Would he
Oh, yeah,
take the train up north? Okay,
sure, sure.
super. Nice, nice, very good. I wondered how that worked. If you can't, I'm asking the audience here, if you have questions and you can't unmute yourself, please put that down in chat. You should be able to unmute yourself. If you can't, write a note saying, I can't unmute myself.
And if you don't have questions, that's fine.
I do.
Well, but let me just add, this has been a joy, and I am happy, as you might imagine, I love travel, to give this talk. And there's actually more Disney in it. I tweaked it to have a little more river. But I love to travel and come to your town or your library or whatever and give this talk. It's a fun look at old Hollywood and vintage Disney and nature and many wonderful things.
Connie.
It was interesting to see in the two clips that you had about the Grand Canyon was that was prior to the dam. So it really
Yes.
was the Rio Colorado.
Yes, that is
Yeah.
all. Those are from the actual movies that were filmed in 59 and 60. So we're talking vintage Colorado River and vintage filmmaking, I might add. But a lot of wonderfully clumsy special, but it's fun to watch. And they were actually in the rapids also, but those are all stunt doubles in those boats, believe me.
Yeah. No, that was great. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
I just wanted to say I'm Rosalind Turnbull. My
Hi.
husband's uncle was Art Metzger, who was the postmaster at the Grand Canyon for 35 years.
Oh,
And in his things was the Grand Canyon Suite record, which I have here. And so I guess was the record or the music made before the film or
yes.
during?
No,
Before?
the music existed. It's before the film. I don't know the exact year. I could look it up. No, well before the film.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. It was
Thank you.
wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That was a lovely story about the Oscar that your father won for 10 Who Dared.
Yes.
Where is that propeller now?
Actually, that propeller is on its way to Kanab, Utah.
Great.
I was going to pack it in my suitcase, and I thought, I'm never getting that thing through the TSA security line. But it's a real testimony to the power of the river. That's a metal propeller that is sheared in half by one of the boats hitting a rock, I guess. So it's a kind of a reminder of the power of the river, not to be taken lightly.
And that was a well-worn propeller. You could see the
Yes, yeah.
paint was
But
stripped
no, my
off.
father did keep it in his studio all those years. And it's kind of a reminder of the less glamorous aspects of filmmaking.
That's awesome.
You have a question on chat?
I do. I was
There's
just
a-
going to run with that, Brian. This is a question from someone who goes by iPhone. I'm not sure who it is, but it says on Highway 40 going up Berthoud Pass toward Winter Park is an avalanche chute known locally as the Disney Slide. A highway employee and a Disney film operator died filming an avalanche there. Do you know anything about this?
I do not. I do not.
Okay.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, don't know. That's
Oh,
and your mom. It sounds like your dad wrote his letters to your mom signed Jimmy. Did anybody else get to call him Jimmy?
no. No.
Okay, I won't either.
You can. Actually, one of my brothers is James Algar, and he is Jamie. So that's my brother's name.
Okay. I just thought that was very cute. Can you tell me some more about the relationship between Al and Elma Malott and your father?
They remained very close friends all the years after the films. My father kept up quite a correspondence with them, just beyond filmmaking, just a real love of nature, a real love of storytelling. And I actually have, there's a collection of letters and journals that they kept. And I do have that source material, but again, trying to coalesce this into a manageable time frame. But no, he remained very close to them and they to him. Both loved to write letters back and forth. So that was a nice communication there. Both all very fine writers as well.
Nice. And they ended up retiring in the Pacific Northwest as well,
Yes.
didn't they?
Yes, they did. They ended up, I think, by Mount Rainier, actually.
That's right. Did they visit your father after his stroke? Do you know?
I don't think so. Ollie Johnston, who I mentioned, and Frank Thomas did visit my father. In fact, I have two of their books that they signed for him. So they did come to Carmel. They lived in California. So they very nice, and they very kept in close touch. And my father really was responsible for them coming to the studio, because when he got the job, he said, "Hey guys, I've got this job, drawing cartoons." And they're like, "Well, okay." Little did they know.
What's really fascinating to me was Marston showed up at the Disney Studios in '46. I could be wrong by a year or two, and showed his river films to Walt. And Walt sent the Malotts on a river trip with Norm Nevels and Doc Marston in '47.
Oh gosh.
And I had never put this together until tonight. When you mentioned this, and Al, a lot of his film was ruined because it got wet on the river trip. But they ran from Green River, Wyoming, through Lador Canyon, and then left the river and came back at Lee's Ferry and ran from Lee's to Phantom. And I think Al ran all the way out, and Elma may have left the trip at Phantom, I'm not sure. And then they came back again in '53 to do the, just to get more studying on the river. But that wasn't Al and Elma, that was Marston and somebody else. But I was really interested just to see that Jim and Al and Elmer were so tight in Africa, and all of the work that the Malotts did over there. It's just fascinating stuff.
It is. And they were just, again, no special equipment. I mean, they were living in the wilds and there are quite a few stories of all the nature photographers. It was hard. It was not a glamorous, staying in the hotels. They were camped out with the buffalo and the wild animals. So a lot of hardship filming that. But again, that's how they got these amazing, in the Grand Canyon suite, I just put the little Roadrunner in there because it's indicative of, what they would capture. And again, this is in the 50s when people didn't have access to nature films. So that's why they won so many Academy Awards, that they were unique of their time. And of course, now we have many different things.
Absolutely. I mean, even today, looking at the video clips that you showed, the sand along the sides of the river, what little bit of sand remains, there's a picture there looking upstream toward Vulcan's Anvil, this tower of basalt sticking up in the river. And the sand along the shorelines is phenomenal there. All that, whatever sand remains, and there's not much left, is covered in vegetation today.
Yeah,
So
60, 70 years ago. So
absolutely.
Nature,
as you
will,
mentioned, before the
nature
dam.
will take over.
As Connie mentioned. So, look at that and just how wonderful those scenes are. That film is really important.
Thank you.
I just wanted to run one more thing past you.
Sure.
By 1947, 46, to get the timeline right, Snow White had been produced. Fantasia had been produced. And The Sorcerer's Apprentice had come out. Was The Sorcerer's Apprentice packaged in something else?
Well, I'll tell you the fun story about that. The Sorcerer's Apprentice is part of Fantasia. It's not a separate film. However, it was created as a short because Walt had this innovative idea to take animation and classical music, and he knew it was very unusual and kind of says, well, I'll take Mickey Mouse. And so The Sorcerer's Apprentice was created as a short and shown around the studio, and took it across the street in Burbank to the gas station, and everybody was like, oh yeah, that's Mickey, that's cute. Well, he made the entire film of Fantasia, which frankly was a flop and almost bankrupted the studio when it came out in 1941. It was just too avant-garde and too strange. In later years, in the 60s, it kind of regained a cult status of a, how shall I say this, psychedelic film.
Yeah.
Sorcerer's Apprentice is the iconic centerpiece of the original. Fantasia was remade in 2000, and they kept the original Sorcerer's Apprentice as the iconic centerpiece of the film. So my father is the director of The Sorcerer's Apprentice. So whenever I see, I can't really see it, never mind. I have a little Mickey in my glass. I collect little Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Try again, pick it up and put it in front of your face.
There,
Move it. Yeah, that's it.
there he is.
Great. Super. Was Bambi in that Fantasia as well?
Yeah.
Bambi was a standalone?
Bambi's a standalone.
And again, that would have been 44?
43, 44.
Okay. All right. All right. Very, very good. Yeah, I think that's all my questions. Sorry,
Hey.
ran through there.
Well, I want to thank everyone. This has been a joy for me, and it's lovely to carry on my father's legacy, if you will. And Disney is such a part of all of our childhood, and no matter what age we are. So it's a very much a joy and an honor to be able to do this, and it's fun too. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, AKA Tekka. If that rings a bell with you.
Yes.
Says, great to see you, and your presentation, it was fabulous, she says.
Tekka was our neighbor across the street as small children. So hello,
Super.
Tekka. Yeah, what fun.
Great.
What fun.
Laurie Algar, thank you so very, very much for this wonderful virtual outing.
Okay.
I'd just like, before we go, the rest of the audience to know the next virtual outing in November. will go back to its normal time at the second Tuesday of the month. And Kern Nuttall will be talking about the cemetery at the south rim of the Grand Canyon. Not quite as lovely as Laurie's presentation tonight. So with that, this will conclude. I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay, good night, everybody. And
Yeah,
I'm
good
going to
night.
sign off as well. Bye.
All right. Thanks so much. Y'all have a good evening. Bye-bye.